The alarms started with a scream that cut through the set like a siren. And within seconds, producers were sprinting, cameras were shaking, and a boom mic clattered to the floor. Word spread in the studio hallway before the crew could even lock the doors. Love and Hip Hop was done. Not paused, not delayed, cancelled. Fans are shocked. And the cast stood frozen as a wave of whispers rolled over the stages where confessions used to echo and secrets used to detonate. Emotions ran high. The family was left divided. "Don't touch me," came the first voice, firm and shaking at once. "Say it to my face," snapped another, harder now, pushing through a tangle of security. A chair scraped. A glass toppled. The red tally light on camera blinked out, then back on, as if refusing to miss what happened next. Crew members reached for headsets. One producer mouthed, "Cut," but no one listened. Over by the makeup mirrors, someone cried. In the corridor, a makeup brush rolled under a cabinet like it was trying to hide from what the night had just become. Back on the main stage, a confrontation that had simmered for months finally boiled over. Old receipts were pulled like playing cards. Betrayals that had been whispered in green rooms were dragged into the lights and slammed onto the table. A text thread, a hotel receipt, a voice note that no one expected to hear on a night shoot. Accusations struck like match after match until the room felt hot with the flame of it all. "Look me in the eyes and tell me you did not set that up," demanded one cast member. "I tried to protect you," answered another, voice cracking, but the words only fed the fire. Then came the shove that changed everything. Quick, instinctive, not cinematic, not slick, real enough to pull the air out of the room. Security flooded the stage. Cameras tilted skyward. A producer shouted for a hard stop. The crew hit black on the monitors. In those silent seconds, careers seemed to hang by a thread. And the show that taught audiences how to fight with words and make peace with cameras found itself staring into a mirror it could not bear. Phones lit up across the city. Group chats exploded. The network phone rang off the hook. Decision made. Love and Hip Hop was cancelled before midnight, and the last image was not a reunion couch or a champagne toast. It was a door slamming shut. The tension backstage had been brewing for weeks. But no one expected it to explode in front of the cameras the way it did that night. It started with a whisper, someone telling someone else that Kirk had been plotting behind the scenes. And before long the entire set was buzzing. Rashida sat in her chair with her arms crossed tight, glaring at the producers who were scrambling to keep things from going off the rails. Jasmine paced the room with her phone in her hand, shaking her head and muttering under her breath, "They think I'm about to stay quiet. Not tonight, not ever." The lights were already blazing hot when young Jock strolled in late, trying to smooth talk his way past security. He laughed when he saw the tension, but that laugh died quick when he realized this wasn't another staged argument. This was the kind of storm that leaves a permanent scar. "Y'all Wilden," he said, holding his hands up, but nobody was listening. The director's voice cracked through the headset. "Keep rolling. Don't you dare cut." Rashida finally stood, eyes locked on Jasmine. "You lied on me. You lied on my family. And now you think you can stand here and act innocent." Her voice shook but her words cut sharp. Jasmine whipped around and fired back. "Your man came to me. Don't you dare twist it like I chased him. I got proof. And I'm not afraid to put it out." Gasps echoed across the set. Even the camera crew couldn't hide their shock. Someone whispered, "This is going to end the show." Mendices, who had been sitting on the far side watching it unfold, finally stood and tried to step in. "We can't do this, like animals. We all got families watching this. Y'all know this is bigger than ratings." But his words only added fuel. Yandi stormed up beside him, shouting across the stage, "Then tell them to stop lying. Tell them to stop dragging us through the mud for a check." The sound of glass breaking froze everyone. A champagne flute had slipped from Carly Red's hand and shattered on the floor. She wasn't even arguing. She was just stunned. She whispered, "If they air this, Love and Hip Hop will never recover." Suddenly producers flooded the floor, but they couldn't contain it. Kirk lunged forward, trying to grab Jasmine's phone before she could pull up the so-called receipts. Security rushed in. Crew members screamed for everyone to calm down, but the cameras were still rolling. Fans in the live audience stood on their chairs, phones raised, recording every second. The room was alive with chaos, shouts, accusations. The crash of props knocked over. "Don't touch me," Jasmine screamed, clutching her phone like it was life itself. Rashida lunged forward, blocked by two guards, tears streaking her face but rage burning in her voice. "Play it then. Show them all. You won't break me. You won't break my family." It was pure pandemonium. Young Jock tried to hold Scrappy back as he shouted something about loyalty and betrayal. The producers, pale and frantic, realized it was spiraling out of control. One turned to the network executive standing in the wings and whispered the words that sealed everything. "We can't save this. We have to shut it down." And just like that, Love and Hip Hop, the show that built an empire on love, betrayal, and survival, had crossed the one line it could never come back from. The set wasn't just divided, it was broken. No reunion special could fix this. No spin-off could hide it. The fight that ended the show had begun, and there was no turning back. The studio lights were still blazing when the chaos spilled into the hallways. Security thought they could separate the cast, but the shouting carried, echoing through the metal doors like a war drum. Rashida was being rushed to her dressing room, but she kept struggling against the handlers, screaming over their shoulders, "Y'all wanted a show. This is the truth. Let the world see it." Her voice was raw, the kind that doesn't come from rehearsed drama, but from years of betrayal finally cracking open. Meanwhile, Jasmine clutched her phone with both hands, her nails digging into the case. Tears streaked down her face, but she refused to hide. "I told them the truth and they called me a liar. Tonight, everybody's gonna know who's really been playing who." She shoved past a producer, storming toward the parking lot as fans outside screamed her name, some cheering, others booing. It was like a stadium fight, and the crowd outside fed off the frenzy inside. Back in the green room, Yandi slammed her fist on the table. "This isn't just about Rashida and Jasmine. This is about how this show has been using us, exploiting us, and tearing us apart." Mendices pulled at her arm, begging her to sit, but she ripped away. "No. They've been profiting off our pain for too long. And now look. The whole thing's collapsing." Her words shook the crew more than the fight itself, because deep down, everyone knew she was right. Carly, red, still trembling, sat in the corner scrolling through her phone. Twitter was already on fire. Hashtags like hashtag LHH cancelled and hashtag RASHEEDAVs, Jasmine, were climbing. Fans were posting clips from the audience footage. Shaky but clear enough to catch the screaming, the pushing, the chaos that had erupted. Carly whispered, "It's already out there. Before the network even decides." She looked up, her voice quivering. "They're not gonna forgive us for this. This is the end." Then, in one of the smaller dressing rooms, Kirk was pacing like a man on trial. His shirt was torn at the collar, his face glistening with sweat. He turned to a producer and growled, "If they air this, I'll sue. This wasn't part of the contract. Y'all let this get out of hand." The producer, exhausted and pale, shot back, "We didn't let anything happen. Kirk, you started it when you grabbed her. The footage is already out. We can't stop the internet." Kirk froze, his rage shifting to panic. "What do you mean it's already out?" The producer just shook his head. "Clips are viral. Millions of views in less than an hour." Meanwhile, Scrappy and Jock were in another hallway, voices bouncing off the concrete. "Man, this ain't no TV fight anymore," Scrappy muttered, shaking his head. Jock leaned in close, lowering his voice. "You realize what this means? No more checks. No more spin-off. We're all done. They're about to pull the plug." Scrappy punched the wall. "After all these years, this is how it ends. Over somebody else's mess." Backstage, one of the network execs made the call. With a deep breath, she muttered into her phone, "Pull the season. Cancel production. Issue the statement tonight." Around her, the crew stared in disbelief. One camera operator whispered, "That's it. After all these years, they just cut us off like that." Another muttered, "It's bigger than us now. This isn't about TV anymore. This is about keeping people safe." By midnight, the headlines were everywhere. Love and Hip Hop cancelled after on-set brawl. Fans shocked as explosive fight ends franchise. Instagram lives buzzed with cast members going live, each telling their side of the story. Rashida cried into the camera, "I gave my life to this show, and this is how it ends." Jasmine snapped back in her own live, "Don't cry now. You knew this was coming. You can't play innocent forever." The comment sections exploded, fans picking sides, families arguing, and celebrities weighing in. The entertainment world was rattled, but for the cast, this was only the beginning of the fallout. Because when one empire crumbles, everyone connected to it starts scrambling to survive. And the fight that ended Love and Hip Hop was only about to get uglier as the aftermath unfolded in real time. By the following morning, the world outside the studio had already transformed into a battlefield of opinions. News vans lined the streets outside the network headquarters. Reporters shouting over each other, microphones thrust into the faces of anyone connected to the cast. Paparazzi swarmed hotel lobbies where cast members were rumored to be staying. Fans stood on sidewalks holding posters, some that read "Justice for Rashida" and others that screamed "Team Jasmine." It was no longer just a television scandal. It was a cultural earthquake. Inside Rashida's hotel suite, The atmosphere was suffocating. Curtains were drawn. Phones buzzing nonstop. Rashida sat at the edge of the bed, hair pulled into a messy bun, eyes swollen from a night of tears. Her mother leaned against the dresser, shaking her head. Baby, they've been exploiting you from the start. You gave them your marriage, your pain, your trust. And now look. Rashida wiped her face, muttering, I thought I was strong enough to take it. I thought I could show women you can survive betrayal. But they wanted blood, not healing. Her voice cracked, and she turned to the camera her cousin had set up for an Instagram live. Within seconds, over 100,000 viewers had joined. They tried to cancel me, she said, her voice low but sharp. But you can't cancel the truth. Across town, Jasmine was in a different kind of storm. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing, bloggers, journalists, strangers offering money for exclusive interviews. She slammed it down on the kitchen counter and screamed, they don't care about me. They just want to eat off the chaos. Her best friend, seated at the table, whispered, girl, you've got the receipts. If you drop them now, you'll own this narrative. Jasmine grabbed her phone again, scrolling through photos and messages that hinted at months of hidden rendezvous with Kirk. If I show the world what I got, Rashida will never recover, she muttered, half to herself, half to the camera. She considered going live on, but doubt flickered in her eyes. Fame and destruction had never been so tangled. Meanwhile, Yandi and Mendices sat at their kitchen table in silence. A news anchor's voice crackled on the television. The cancellation of Love and Hip-Hop marks the end of an era in reality television. Fans are demanding answers. Yandi broke the silence. This is what I was talking about. They used us up and now they're tossing us aside. Mendices rubbed his temples. We should have walked away years ago. Yandi slammed her palm on the table. No, we're not victims. We're survivors. If they think the story ends here, they're wrong. We'll tell our side. At the same time, the network's office was in panic mode. Executives sat around a long mahogany table, phones buzzing with angry shareholders, furious advertisers, and terrified publicists. One executive leaned forward, whispering, we underestimated how quickly this would spread. We can't bury it. It's too late. Another shook his head, muttering, the brand is toxic now. We'll never rebuild from this. The CEO finally raised her voice. We cancel the contracts, all of them, effective immediately. Damage control begins now. The room fell silent, realizing the franchise that had carried their network for years was now dead in the water. But the internet was still blazing. Twitter threads dissected every second of the leaked fight footage. TikTok edits turned the chaos into viral. One clip of Rashida screaming, show them all, was already trending as a remix. Another of Jasmine yelling, don't touch me, had been set to dramatic slow motion and hit millions of views. Fans weren't just watching the drama, they were repackaging it, breathing life into a storm the network could no longer contain. By evening, celebrities from outside the show weighed in. Rap stars, influencers, even comedians added fuel, taking sides or cracking jokes. But the mood wasn't light everywhere. In Atlanta, fans gathered outside Frost Bistro, Rashida's restaurant, chanting her name and demanding answers. Kirk slipped out the back, cap pulled low, as paparazzi chased him down the street, shouting, did you cheat again? Did you ruin Love and Hip-Hop? He said nothing, only slamming the door of his car and peeling off into the night. And so the question hung heavy over everything. Who would speak first? Who would drop the real bombshell? And who would be destroyed in the fallout? Because while the show had been cancelled, the story had only just begun to spiral into something much bigger than television. It was now survival. It was reputation. It was war. By the third day, the fallout had turned into a full-blown national scandal. Every gossip site, every entertainment blog, every morning talk show was running the same headline in bold. Love and Hip-Hop implodes cast members at war after cancellation. Clips of the explosive fight replayed on loop, dissected frame by frame like evidence in a trial. Analysts and so-called relationship experts were invited onto television panels to debate what had really gone wrong, and fans across the world were locked in digital combat, arguing fiercely in comment sections and group chats. In Atlanta, Rashida decided she could no longer stay quiet. She walked into her boutique with cameras trailing outside and called a press conference right there between racks of clothes. Dozens of fans pressed their faces against the windows as she stood tall, mic in hand, wearing a black outfit that screamed mourning more than fashion. I built my life on showing women that no matter what comes your way, you can rise above it, she declared. But the truth is, this show didn't want healing. It wanted destruction. And they came for my family. Her words trembled on the edge of fury. A fan shouted from the doorway, we love you, Rashida. And the crowd erupted, but she raised her hand for silence. This is not the end of me. They cancelled a show, but they will never cancel my voice. At that exact moment, Jasmine was across town filming her own interview with a major blog. Seated on a velvet couch, her eyes glistened as she clutched her phone like a weapon. Everybody paints me as the villain, she said softly. But nobody asks why I kept the receipts. You don't keep receipts unless you're scared, unless you're threatened. Then, with trembling fingers, she tapped her screen and revealed the first screenshot, a message from Kirk that hinted at secret meetings, late-night calls, and promises that blurred the line between loyalty and betrayal. The room fell silent. The interviewer leaned forward, whispering, "Are you saying he admitted to more than what was shown?" Jasmine smirked faintly. "I'm saying this story is deeper than what you saw on TV, and if Rashida wants to play innocent, I'm ready to show the world everything." The internet exploded within minutes. Screenshots of the texts spread faster than wildfire, fans screenshotting the screenshots before they could be deleted. Hashtags divided the world. Hashtag justice for RASHEEDA versus hashtag receipts DONT lie. Arguments spilled into Instagram lives, with viewers demanding the truth. Celebrities taking sides, and former cast members suddenly reappearing to stir the pot. Even Carly Red, who had tried to stay silent, broke down during her own live, tears streaming as she said, "I warned them. I told them the receipts were real, and now everybody's acting shocked. This is why the show had to end." Meanwhile, Kirk was spiraling, holed up in a rented condo, blinds drawn tight. He paced like a caged animal. His phone buzzed with lawyers warning him to stay quiet, but the anger in his voice couldn't be contained. "They're ruining me? They're ruining everything I built." One of his closest friends tried to calm him down. "Bro, you gotta think about Rashida. She's breaking too. This isn't just about you." Kirk snapped back. "This is about all of us. They're trying to erase me from history. And I won't let it happen." Network executives, meanwhile, were in pure damage control mode. A leaked email surfaced showing frantic discussions. "Do we sue the cast for breach of contract?" One exec wrote. Another fired back. "Sue them. They'll drag us in the mud with them. The only way forward is a clean break. Shut down everything. Remove reruns. Distance the brand." When the email leaked online, fans erupted again. The idea that the network wanted to bury the entire history of the show only poured gasoline on the fire. Viewers screamed that their favorite moments were being erased. Memes appeared with captions like "You can't cancel culture, we're the culture." By the end of the week, protests formed outside the network headquarters. Fans carried signs that read "Bring back LHH" and "We deserve the truth." News anchors compared the chaos to reality, TV's own version of a revolution. In the midst of it all, Yandy stepped into the spotlight again. She went live with Mendices at her side and declared, "This isn't the end of the story. If the network wants to silence us, then we'll take control of the narrative ourselves. We'll tell the truth uncut, unedited, and unapproved." The live hit over 1 million viewers in less than an hour. Comments flew so fast they blurred into static. Fans begged for details, for dirt, for confessions. And Yandy leaned closer to the camera, her voice low and steady. "The fight you saw on set wasn't even the worst of it. There are things you didn't see, secrets that were too dangerous to air. But now we're not holding back." The screen faded to black, but the world buzzed louder than ever. Because if Yandy was telling the truth, the cancellation wasn't the climax of the story. It was just the beginning of a scandal that promised to tear open every hidden wound the show had ever tried to bury. By the time Yandy's cryptic live replayed across Instagram and TikTok, the internet was already bracing for another bombshell. Fans sat up late at night, refreshing their feeds, dissecting every word she said. Blogs posted headlines like "What is Yandy hiding?" and "Explosive truths yet to come" after LHH cancellation. The cancellation itself had become secondary. What people wanted now were the hidden secrets, the ones producers allegedly cut to protect reputations and contracts. In Atlanta, Rashida was drowning in the noise. Her phone buzzed endlessly with calls from reporters. But what shook her most was the constant ping of notifications from her fans. Thousands of messages poured in, some offering support, others accusing her of lying, of covering for Kirk, of knowing everything Jasmine was ready to expose. She sat in her kitchen with her youngest child asleep in the next room, tears rolling down her face as she whispered to her sister, "They don't see me as a person anymore. I'm just content for them." Her sister wrapped an arm around her shoulders and said, "Then take back control. Don't let Jasmine write your story." Rashida's eyes hardened. "Then I'll speak, but on my terms." Meanwhile, Jasmine wasn't backing down. She went live again, holding her phone close, the light casting sharp shadows on her face. Yandi wants to act like she knows secrets. Honey, I've been sitting on the truth for years. Kirk played both sides, and Rashida knew it. Don't let her act like some innocent wife who got blindsided. I got receipts that prove she let it slide until the cameras caught on. Gasps filled the chat as her comments flooded with thousands of viewers spamming, "Drop them receipts." Jasmine smirked but shook her head. Not yet, y'all ain't ready. The next twist came not from the cast, but from the crew. A former production assistant leaked audio files online and edited clips from the night of the fight. The sounds were chilling. Rashida's voice breaking, Jasmine's furious screams, the thud of bodies colliding with furniture, security shouting, and a producer yelling, "Keep rolling, this is gold." Fans were outraged. Memes spread accusing the network of exploiting real violence for ratings. Hashtags like #shame on the network and #protect the cast trended overnight. The network issued a statement denying responsibility, but the damage was already done. Carly Red, unable to keep silent anymore, called into a popular radio show the next morning. Her voice cracked as she recounted the fight. "I saw things I wish I could unsee. This wasn't reality TV anymore. It was people breaking down in front of us. And the worst part, they knew the cameras were still rolling. They wanted it." The host gasped. "Are you saying the producers encouraged it?" Carly hesitated, then sighed. "I'm saying, they didn't stop it. And now everyone's paying the price." By then, Kirk was a ghost. He hadn't been seen in public for days, and rumors swirled that he'd fled the city. Some blogs claimed he was hiding in Miami, others insisted he was holed up in a family member's basement. His silence only made things worse. Fans flooded his last Instagram post with comments calling him a coward, demanding answers. One viral tweet read, "Kirk ruined Rashida, ruined Jasmine, ruined the show. Man disappeared like a thief in the night." The backlash was relentless. In New York, Yandi and Mendices sat with a podcast host for an exclusive tell-all. The episode dropped unannounced at midnight, and within hours it shot to the top of the charts. Yandi didn't hold back. "You think that fight was about cheating? That was just the surface. What really ended the show was the betrayal behind the cameras. Deals made, lies told, people silenced." When pressed for details, she leaned in and said, "There was money being moved, cast members being set up, and when the truth started to come out, they panicked. That's why the show's gone." The revelation sent fans into overdrive. Suddenly, the story wasn't just about infidelity or a fight. It was about corruption, manipulation, and money. Bloggers dug into old contracts, ex-staff came forward anonymously, and whispers grew into shouts that the franchise had been rotten from the inside long before the final blow-up. Outside the chaos, the fans themselves had become divided armies. Street murals appeared overnight, one side depicting Rashida as a betrayed queen, the other painting Jasmine as a fearless truth-teller. Clubs hosted Team Rashida versus Team Jasmine nights, where DJs remixed the fight audio over bass-heavy tracks. It was no longer just entertainment. It was pop culture turned into a war zone. And still, the looming question grew louder. If the fight was just the spark, what was the real fire burning underneath? Because everyone, fans, critics, even the cast themselves, felt that the darkest secret of all had yet to be revealed. The storm only deepened as weeks went by, and the cancellation of Love and Hip Hop transformed from a shocking headline into a full-scale cultural obsession. Every major network, gossip blog, and podcast fed on the chaos like sharks, circling blood in the water. But the biggest weight fell on the shoulders of the cast, who were now living in a world without the security of the show that had once made them famous. Rashida tried to keep her business afloat, showing up at Frost Bistro to prove she was still standing. But even there, the atmosphere was toxic. Fans crowded the sidewalks, some shouting encouragement, others chanting accusations, and paparazzi cameras flashed with every move she made. At one point, she stood at the door of her restaurant and shouted, "I am more than this drama." But the crowd only roared louder, hungry for answers she wasn't ready to give. Across town, Jasmine leaned further into her role as the villain-turned-whistleblower, appearing on blogs and hinting at even darker truths that would blow the lid off everything. She stopped short of releasing her full archive of screenshots, but her smirk whenever the subject came up convinced millions that she was holding the nuclear weapon in her hand. Yandi and Mendices pushed their narrative of corruption through their podcast appearances, insisting that the producers manipulated events, planted lies, and fueled betrayals just to keep the cameras rolling. And their words sparked a new debate. Was the downfall of the show really the cast's fault, or had the network engineered its own destruction? Carly Red, visibly shaken in every interview, tried to distance herself from the madness but couldn't escape the constant phone calls, the crying fits on camera, the whispers that she knew more than she was letting on. And through it all, Kirk remained a phantom, hiding from the world as rumors of lawsuits, unpaid debts, and secret families spread like wildfire. Fans weren't just demanding the truth anymore, they were demanding accountability, and with every passing day, it became clearer that the fight on set was only the beginning of a much larger war that threatened to destroy reputations, families, and the very legacy of a show that had once dominated reality television. Would you like me to continue with the next installment in this flowing paragraph style, picking up the aftermath and revealing even bigger twists? The chaos reached a fever pitch when a leaked court document surfaced online, suggesting that several cast members were under investigation for breach of contract and possible fraud tied to undisclosed side deals. Within hours, screenshots of the papers went viral, fueling wild speculation. Some fans claimed the network had set traps to pin the blame squarely on the cast, while others insisted the stars had been pocketing secret payouts for staged drama that went too far. Rashida's name appeared in the paperwork, and though her lawyers denied everything, the damage was done suddenly. She was painted not only as a betrayed wife but as a businesswoman caught in the flames of scandal. Jasmine, of course, wasted no time. She jumped on Instagram Live and sneered, "Didn't I tell y'all they were hiding the truth? They built an empire off lies, and now it's all crashing down." Her comments section lit up with fans begging her to finally drop the full receipts, while others accused her of riding the storm for clout. Meanwhile, Yandi doubled down, appearing on national television with Mendices to claim the network executives were sacrificing cast members to save their own skin. She spoke with fire in her voice, declaring, "They wanted us to bleed on camera, and when we bled too much, they acted like we were disposable." That line went viral within minutes, quoted everywhere from memes to morning shows, cementing her as the unofficial spokesperson for the fallen empire. At the same time, former cast members who had long left the spotlight started popping up in interviews, each dropping their own piece of gossip, each trying to carve out relevance in the crumbling legacy. The streets of Atlanta became a backdrop for paparazzi wars, with cameras catching Rashida leaving in tears, Kirk ducking under hoodies, and Jasmine strutting out of beauty salons with a grin that taunted everyone watching. Even club DJs got involved, blasting unreleased audio clips of arguments over the speakers while crowds screamed the lines word for word. It wasn't just a television scandal anymore, it was a social phenomenon, a public unraveling of fame and family that seemed to have no bottom. And yet, through all the noise, one chilling question kept surfacing in headlines, tweets, and conversations across the world. What secret had the producers cut from the show that was so explosive it could end not just love and hip-hop, but the reputations of everyone tied to it? The whispers about the hidden footage became the oxygen fueling the fire, and fans grew convinced that somewhere, locked away in the network's archives, was a scene so raw and destructive it could never be aired. Bloggers swore insiders had confirmed its existence, describing it as the real reason production pulled the plug overnight. Suddenly, conspiracy theories flooded timelines. Some claimed it showed Kirk admitting to fathering yet another secret child. Others insisted it captured a violent clash between cast and producers that nearly turned deadly. The speculation was relentless, and every new rumor tightened the grip of obsession on a fan base already split into rival camps. Rashida, under unbearable pressure, finally addressed the speculation during a shaky livestream. Her eyes were swollen from lack of sleep, her voice trembling as she said, "If there is footage, I haven't seen it. But I'll tell you this, what happened that night broke all of us in ways you'll never understand." She broke down mid-sentence, forcing her assistant to cut the feed, and that raw moment only sent fans into further frenzy. Jasmine, on the other hand, seemed to relish the storm. At a club appearance, she grabbed the mic and taunted the crowd, "Y'all want the truth? The truth is worse than you think, and when I drop it, nobody's walking away clean." The crowd erupted, phones flashing, her words looping online within minutes. Meanwhile, Yandi and Mendices hinted on their podcast that they had seen evidence of illegal deals behind the scenes, contracts that tied cast members into silence while producers pocketed millions. "It wasn't just drama," Yandi said, her tone grave. "It was manipulation at the highest level." For the first time, the scandal felt bigger than cheating rumors or explosive arguments. It felt like a takedown of an entire system. Even the network's attempts at damage control backfired. As their official statement, there is no unreleased footage of any serious incident, was dissected word by word, mocked as a flimsy denial. Outside their offices, angry fans rallied with signs demanding the truth, their chance captured by every major news outlet. What had started as a fight between cast members had spiraled into an indictment of reality TV itself, and the haunting question lingered heavier than ever. What could possibly be so shocking, so dangerous, that an entire franchise had to be sacrificed to bury it? The countdown to the truth began on a humid Friday night when the city felt like it was holding its breath. And the weight of silence pressed just as hard as the noise. Because although the show was dead, the story would not stay buried, and the people who had lived inside that franchise were now trying to live outside of it without losing their names or their minds. And that was when the email hit every gossip desk in America with a subject line that read "Vault Keys." A phrase so simple and so devastating that bloggers screamed across their kitchens and editors slammed coffee cups down, and the internet lit like a match dropped into gasoline, because attached to that email was a single still frame that looked like nothing and everything all at once. The edge of a conference table, a handwritten ledger, a producer's hand pointing at a line item labeled Contingency B, and a date that matched the week the brawl went down. Within minutes, the still was everywhere, and fans were screaming that Contingency B was producer code for a planned meltdown. A setup so brazen it explained why security was slow, why the cameras did not cut, why the room looked arranged the way it did, with breakables, too close to elbows, and egos perched on corners like grenades with pins halfway out. And while the network fired off a stiff denial, Rashida stared at the image on her phone until her vision blurred, whispering to her mother, "They kept books on us." And her mother said, "They kept books, and they kept secrets, baby. Now make yours count." And across town Jasmine was pacing by a window as streetlights streaked the glass, telling her best friend, "If Contingency B is real, then the night wasn't an accident. The night was a trap, and they wanted me to be the fuse." And her friend said, "Then light them up. But be sure you survive the fire." And still the city held its breath, while Yandy and Mendici recorded another midnight tell-all in a studio that smelled like coffee and stress. And Yandy said into the mic, her voice steady and low, "They wrote our pain into line items and sold it as story beats. And when the beats got bloody, they called it unfortunate and said they valued safety. If you want the truth, follow the money." And Mendici's added, "And follow the messages from burner phones. Because the same people who told us to go harder are the ones who told the press they were shocked." Which was when a former field producer slid into the discourse with a thread that read like testimony, explaining in calm, chilling words that Contingency B meant extra budget for security, emergency pickups, and, yes, provocative setups, which were legal-sounding phrases for staging rooms, placing triggers, nudging rivalries, and then stepping back as if chaos was weather that rolled in by itself. That thread hit like a sledgehammer, the comments howling as fans typed in all caps and former cast from spin-offs started co-signing, with careful hearts and shaking hands. And in the first hour after it posted, Rashida's phone lit up with texts from people she had not heard from in years. Some saying "I'm sorry," some saying "We warned you," and one that made her sit down on the floor of her closet with the door shut tight, a message from an unknown number that read, "The vault isn't just a room, the vault is a schedule and a password. You already have one piece," followed by a string of numbers and a short audio clip where a producer's voice said, "If we can get her to bring the phone on stage and hold it up, I promise you we will have our moment." And then a male laugh, then the scrape of a chair. She played the clip again and again until she recognized the cadence. The same voice she had once trusted to stitch her family's fractures into ratings and redemption arcs. And she stood up like the floor was fire under her feet and called her lawyer, saying, "I'm done protecting people who never protected me." And while her team scrambled to authenticate the audio, Jasmine was meeting with a blogger in a diner where the waitress topped off their coffee with a hand that shook, because everyone in Atlanta was on edge. The blogger asking, "Are you afraid of what happens if you empty your camera roll on the world?" And Jasmine answering, "I'm afraid of never being believed. That's what they built into me. But fear isn't feeding me anymore." And she slid her phone across the table like a dealer, showing a folder of screenshots labeled "Housekeeping," a title almost funny until the first image opened and it was a chat, with a number saved as S, the text saying, "We can soften the edit if you can talk about your doubts on camera." And her reply, "Doubts about what?" And theirs, about whether she really forgave him. And the next bubble, and if she didn't forgive him completely, what might she do if she were pushed? Followed by a winking face that felt less like emoji and more like a threat. And while the blogger stared at the screen in a tremble of vindication and dread, young Jock went live without warning, raw and unfiltered, saying, "Y'all want me to keep lying about how it got that bad, but I ain't built for that anymore." They told us we were captains, steering our stories. But they were the currents pulling under. And in the chat Scrappy typed, facts, and Carly typed a single broken heart. And 100,000 fans typed, say names, but Jock didn't, because even now the names were knives and the knives still cut. And meanwhile, the network's legal office was lit like an emergency room, lawyers in shirt sleeves and tense-eyes drafting statements that sounded compassionate and empty at the same time. The PR lead reading the room and knowing that compassion without confession was smoke without water. And someone said, if they drop more audio, we're done. And someone else said, we're already done. We're just not declared. And by dawn, the city exhaled into a new kind of morning, where the birds felt too loud and the headlines felt heavier. And Rashida, dressed in simple black with no makeup and no jewelry, told her team to set up a camera in the dining room, sun slanting through the blinds. And when they went live, she didn't cry and she didn't break. She spoke in steady lines that cut cleaner than tears. They told me healing was boring, that forgiveness didn't trend, that love without a side of ruin wouldn't rate. I gave them my growth and they asked for my blood, and when I bled to real, they raised their hands and said they were shocked. I am done making my pain a product, and when she finished, the comments scrolled like a river. Fans crying, aunties praying, critics stunned into silence. And then the screen flickered to a new notification because while she was talking, a second leak appeared. This time a calendar invite from a network assistant with the subject, Vault Poll, Week 23, listing attendees with titles that made people dizzy. And the agenda line reading, review pickups for arc continuity and high-impact reveals, assess contingency B impact, ensure compliance with sponsor language, and the word sponsor snapped the internet's attention to a whole other corner of the chaos. Because if sponsors were in the room, then sponsors had to decide what violence looked like when it was profitable and what it looked like when it was liability. And brands started issuing tidy statements about valuing safety and supporting communities. And fans replied with screenshots of old campaigns cut to scenes of tears and screaming, asking, which community? And the comment battles were so fierce that one brand pulled its entire archive in a panic, which only made the rage roar louder. And even as all of that churned, the former field producer who had started the thread came back with one more post that made people go still. Because it was a photo of a nondescript hallway labeled Archive 3, ceiling low and walls beige. And the caption read, if you've ever wondered where stories go when they're too real to air, they go here. And within an hour protesters were outside the network building with signs that said, unlock the vault, their chance, echoing against glass and steel while inside a security team huddled near the elevators and the CEO stared at a screen. Savor that bounced a logo around like a taunt. In that pressure cooker heartbeat, someone decided to save themselves, because a link appeared through an anonymous account containing a single 7-minute cut of raw footage from the night everything broke. And it was worse and different than what anyone had imagined, not because of blood or bruises, but because of what was said into a headset right before the shove. A producer's voice whispering, if she gets to the center mark with the phone, cue the light, cue Jock to interject, and do not cut. Whatever happens, do not cut. And then the moment itself, the delicate kindling of pride and fear and history and fatigue, and the kindling catching, and the room flaring into a human fire while the red tally lights stayed on like eyes refusing to blink. That 7-minute clip was enough to flip the world on its axis, because it proved intention where the network had pleaded surprise. And in living rooms and break rooms and barbershops, people watched with tight jaws, old fans suddenly grieving, new viewers horrified and fascinated. And the clip forced conversations that reality TV had ducked for years about what it demands from the people who feed it and what it leaves them with when the lights cool and the credits roll. Out of that grief came something like resolve. And Rashida called Jasmine, and for a long second, neither spoke. Because silence between rivals is a bridge that can carry more weight than shouting. And then Rashida said, they wrote us as enemies to keep us from seeing the real enemy. And Jasmine said, I don't know if I can forgive you for everything, and I don't know if you can forgive me. But I'm done fighting for other people's profit. And Rashida said, then we stop. And Jasmine said, then we stop. And that was how two women, who had been turned into weapons, set them down in the same hour that the network tried to pick them back up by offering new deals that read like olive branches and felt like handcuffs, limited series, creative control, healing special, words that tasted sweet and rang hollow. And both women said no, which stunned the boardroom and electrified the city. And if there was any doubt about whether the franchise was truly over, it died when Yandi posted a simple title card for a docuseries, not on a network but on a platform they were building themselves. a stark promise in white text on black. We own our story, and under it the date and the city and a list of names that included former cast, crew, and even editors who had cut the nightly dramas into cliffhangers. People ready to talk about how it worked and who got paid and who got played. Sponsors didn't know where to look. Lawyers reached for pens. Fans reached for wallets. And as pre-orders and subscriptions stacked like bricks, the same internet that had feasted on the fallout became a scaffold, lifting the people who had been characters back into their actual lives. And on the night they shot the first hour of We Own Our Story, cameras rolled with the quiet you'd hear in a church. No audience, no cue for applause, just a circle of chairs and a promise not to exploit, with Rashida and Jasmine seated opposite, hands clasped tight in their own laps, and a moderator who did not interrupt when pauses stretched, because sometimes the space between sentences is where the truth sits. And it took almost 20 minutes before anyone said a thing worth clipping. And when it came, it was small and enormous. Rashida saying, "I am sorry for the times I let the cameras turn me cruel," and Jasmine saying, "I am sorry for the times I turned the truth into a knife," and nowhere. In that room was there a producer whispering into a headset to ramp the conflict or tilt a light to make a tear glisten, and outside the world kept arguing because the world will always argue, but inside that circle, something ended and began at once, and as the feed later went live to millions, the comments still split into camps because old habits die hard, yet threaded through. The noise was a new refrain from fans who had grown up with these people, fans who had learned messy lessons from polished chaos, typing, healed, but tell it all, and the cast understood that telling it all was the only way to make the healing real, which is why they kept rolling long after the credits would have fallen on the old show. And they talked about money and marriage, and editors, and NDAs, and the night the vault doors cracked. And they did it without screaming, which astonished everyone who had only ever seen them perform pain at high volume. And when the first episode ended, the screen did not fade to black. It faded to a list of crisis lines, and therapist collectives, and legal resources for performers. An ending that was really a beginning. And somewhere in a quiet condo with the blinds still drawn, Kirk watched and finally texted a single line to a number that had once rung in a dressing room. "I want to tell mine," and the reply came back, "Then sit down and tell it. But do not expect redemption to be edited for you." And he put the phone face down and breathed for what felt like the first time in months. And outside the heat lifted a little as the city's exhale spread block by block, because even if the franchise had ended with a door slamming shut, a different door had opened with a hinge that didn't squeal for drama, and behind that door, people who had been framed and lit were now writing, producing, and owning. And the moment the world realized the culture would keep moving without the machine that had fed on it, the old power centers blinked, because shock belongs to those who did not see the shift coming, and everyone else was already busy, turning the wreckage into work, turning the vault into an archive for accountability, turning rivalries into uncomfortable alliances, turning a cancellation into a blueprint. And, though fans were shocked and emotions ran high and the families were left divided by years of televised wounds, a new kind of episode rolled out anyway, not neat, not easy, but stubbornly alive. The story no longer a product, but a reckoning. And in that reckoning, the people who had once been pushed to center marks under hot lights stepped off their marks and discovered they still existed when the red tally went dark. They still had voices when the cues ended, and their lives unspooled from could stretch past cliffhangers into something the old show never offered, a future that was messy and theirs, and the future, messy as it was, unfolded like a live broadcast that nobody could switch off. Because once the dam had broken, there was no stopping the flood of revelations, reconciliations, and raw confessions that poured into the culture day after day. Rashida stepping onto stages not to perform a storyline but to tell women how she had lived inside one for so long she almost forgot who she was. Jasmine releasing a memoir that read less like gossip and more like a survival manual for anyone who had ever been turned into a caricature. Yandy touring colleges with Mendizes to lecture about contracts and manipulation. Carly Red starting a podcast that was half laughter and half tears as she admitted she had often agreed to play the fool because she was scared of what would happen if she stopped. Scrappy dropping songs that carried his side of the story in bars that fans dissected like scripture. And even Kirk, long silent, appearing in a gray hoodie in a long-form sit-down where he said, "I lied for the cameras, I lied for myself, and I hurt people who didn't deserve it. And if you're looking for excuses, you won't find them here." And the interviewer let the silence hang until it became a kind of truth on its own. Meanwhile, the network that had once bankrolled the chaos sat in ruins, lawsuits piling higher than ratings ever had, advertisers fleeing, their vault of unaired footage no longer a treasure but evidence. And still, the people who had been broken in its shadow refused to stop talking, refused to stop reclaiming, so that what began as cancellation swelled into transformation. The fans still divided, the debate still hot, but somewhere in the noise, a collective realization rising like dawn. That maybe the end of love and hip-hop was not a collapse, but a beginning. Not a final brawl, but the first breath after years of scripted suffocation. And as the city of Atlanta pulsed with murals, protests, documentaries, songs, books, and lives stitched back together in crooked seams, the legend of the fight that ended the show became less about who shoved who or which receipt was real and more about how a franchise built on exploitation accidentally sparked a movement for ownership. And though the streets would never forget the tears, the screams, the slammed doors, they would also never forget the moment when the cast stood up and said, with voices no longer cracked by edits, that their stories belong to them now and forever. The movement only grew stronger as the months rolled forward, until it felt less like an aftermath and more like an uprising. Because what had started as a single cancellation turned into a domino effect across reality television. Other casts from other shows stepping out of shadows, speaking into microphones, posting uncut clips of their own, confessing how producers had fed them lines, dangled checks, and set traps that wrecked marriages and friendships. And in every city, fans listened with the same mix of outrage and fascination, realizing that the chaos they had consumed for entertainment was a carefully engineered cage. And yet, within that cage, people had laughed, cried, and lived too. So their pain was real, even if the spark was planned. Rashida became the face of resilience, appearing on magazine covers not as a wife scorned, but as a woman who turned her scars into scripture. Jasmine became the lightning rod, praised by some as brave, vilified by others as opportunistic, but never ignored. Yandy was the strategist, building platforms and partnerships, dragging conversations about fairness into boardrooms that once rolled their eyes. And even Carly, long dismissed as comic relief, carved space as a truth-teller whose tears no longer felt rehearsed, while the network that once controlled them shrank to a whisper. Its headquarters shuddered, its vault cracked wide open by subpoenas. The myth of control shattered like the glass that had fallen during the fight, and the fans, though divided into armies, found themselves united in one reality. They had witnessed the end of an era and the birth of another, one where the cast no longer waited for cues or edits, where they wrote their own lines and set their own stages. And so the phrase that once trended as a funeral love and hip-hop canceled transformed into a battle cry, a reminder that when a door slammed shut in violence, another opened in defiance. And through that door walked a cast that refused to be forgotten, carrying their chaos, their wounds, and their truth into a world finally ready to hear them uncut. The story did not fade when the cameras cut, it only mutated, spilling into corners of culture where even the network had no reach. Because when a machine that fed on spectacle collapsed, it left behind a crater. And in that crater voices rose, some bitter, some broken, some raw with the urgency of finally being heard. And those voices carried into living rooms, radios, blogs, stages, and podcasts, until the saga of love and hip-hop felt less like entertainment and more like a cautionary anthem whispered in the alleys of Atlanta and shouted from the rooftops of New York. And Rashida, whose tears had once been used as cliffhangers, found herself transformed into a reluctant leader, standing at rallies where fans chanted her name not because they pitied her, but because they saw themselves in her fight to survive betrayal and exposure, while Jasmine doubled down on her new identity as both survivor and provocateur, unapologetically showing up at interviews draped in bold colors and saying with a smirk, "They wrote me as the villain, but villains don't tell lies. Villains tell truths people can't handle." A line that fans printed on t-shirts and DJs looped into tracks that shook nightclubs until the floors pulsed. And Yandy, meticulous and fiery, built an entire coalition of former reality stars who had been discarded when their usefulness ended. And together, they launched panels, documentaries, and workshops under a banner called Unscripted Voices, each event drawing crowds who once tuned in for catfights, but now tuned in for testimonies. And Mendices, often the quietest of the bunch, emerged as a grounding figure, his calm tone cutting through chaos as he admitted how contracts had been designed to keep them desperate, promising fame while bleeding away ownership, a revelation that made young artists lean forward and take notes like students at the feet of a hard-won professor. And meanwhile, Carly Red, once mocked for her tears, turned her pain into power by releasing a Talal podcast series called The Edit, where she invited editors, camera operators, and even hairstylists to speak on how the show demanded they craft illusions. And each episode went viral because fans could hear in the voices of crew members the same exhaustion and regret that had haunted the cast. And through it all, the network tried to salvage itself with spin-offs and but every attempt collapsed under the weight of distrust, because viewers no longer bought the fiction that these meltdowns were accidents. Not after the vault leaks. Not after the headset audio. Not after receipts proved that chaos was scripted into budgets like set decoration. So the executives watched helplessly as advertisers fled and lawsuits multiplied, their once mighty empire reduced to a name whispered with contempt in boardrooms, while outside their crumbling fortress, the former stars they once controlled were building new empires, brick by brick. Rashida investing in women's shelters, Jasmine launching a fashion line rooted in defiance, Yandi lobbying for performer protections in state legislatures, Carly laughing through tears as she read fan letters that said her podcast had made them quit toxic jobs, and Scrappy dropping verses that sampled the fight audio but turned it into an anthem of survival. And everywhere fans debated fiercely, some still clinging to old alliances, some screaming Team Rashida, others swearing by Team Jasmine, but all of them united by a shared obsession with the night the show imploded, the night the vault cracked, the night reality TV was exposed not as reflection but as machine. And as documentaries aired, articles spread, and social media burned, the stories swelled until it was no longer about one show, no longer about one fight, but about the price of turning pain into product. And though the families remained divided, emotions ran high, and the scars were permanent, the cast found themselves living in a strange kind of freedom, where their wounds no longer belonged to contracts or cameras. And so the saga rolled forward like a storm, not tidy, not finished, but alive, echoing across screens and stages until it felt eternal, until people whispered to each other not just about the scandal but about the survival. Because in the end the cancellation was not the end at all, it was the beginning of a reckoning. And in that reckoning every scream, every shove, every tear, and every leaked receipt found its place in a history too jagged to edit and too loud to silence. A history that stretched on, pulsing through headlines and dragging the legacy of love and hip-hop from entertainment into legend. The noise refused to quiet because every day brought a new ripple, and those ripples stacked into waves that crashed across the culture. The cancellation of Love and Hip Hop, no longer just a television headline but a living saga bleeding into politics, music, fashion, and even family dinner tables, with parents shaking their heads as kids repeated lines from leaked clips like scripture, and preachers using the implosion as metaphors in sermons about sin, spectacle, and redemption. And in Atlanta, the streets felt alive with murals that depicted Rashida not as a broken wife, but as a phoenix rising, Jasmine painted beside her with flames in her hands, Yandi, in the background holding a contract ripped to shreds, Carly red with tears turned into diamonds falling across her cheeks, and Scrappy immortalized mid-verse spitting bars of survival, the art becoming pilgrimage spots where fans gathered with candles and hashtags scrawled in spray paint, while bloggers documented the phenomenon like it was history in the making. And the cast themselves leaned into this new mythos with a mix of pride and exhaustion, because though they had escaped the cage of edits and headsets, they now carried the weight of a movement that demanded constant truth, and truth was heavier than drama ever was. Rashida, confessing during a panel that some nights she still woke up screaming from dreams of cameras following her into bathrooms. Jasmine admitting that sometimes she missed the simplicity of being hated because it was easier than being half believed. Yandi detailing the threats she received from powerful figures who wanted her to stop talking about corruption. Carly sobbing as she explained how her children begged her not to go back on television. And Scrappy standing in a recording booth whispering before he rapped, "This ain't for them. This is for us," and dropping verses that played like documentaries with beats. While the network's ruins continued to smolder, executives subpoenaed, assistants flipping under pressure, entire archives seized by investigators who warned that the world hadn't even seen the worst yet. And when news broke that several vault tapes had been leaked into underground forums, fans flocked to watch grainy footage of arguments, breakdowns, and betrayals that had never aired. Footage, ROR, than any storyline. Footage that proved again and again how pain had been mined for profit. And though critics decried the voice, others argued that only by watching could the full cost be understood. And in the noise of that moral war the cast held together, imperfectly, awkwardly, but held nonetheless, bound by scars and resolve. And in that holding the saga stretched further, fans clamoring for more, demanding each voice, each receipt, each secret until the story of a cancellation became the story of a reckoning so vast it felt biblical, a parable of spectacle and consequence that no edit could contain. No sponsor could sanitize. No network could bury. And so the legacy of love and hip-hop marched on, jagged and unbroken, louder than ratings, longer than seasons, alive in every whisper, every mural, every chant, every headline, and every trembling confession that once would have been cut but now rolled raw into history. The saga stretched like an endless reel unspooling across the culture, because just when it seemed the storm had exhausted itself, new revelations reignited the fire. And what had begun as a scandal in a single studio turned into a saga rewriting the entire language of reality television. Rashida, moving like a general through the wreckage, giving speeches in churches where grandmothers cried and teenagers cheered, her words weaving tales of betrayal and survival that felt like scripture to those who had lived in silence, while Jasmine strutted unapologetically through fashion weeks draped in bold designs from her own line, turning every catwalk into a battlefield where she declared with her eyes that villains only exist when someone else is writing the story. And Yandy carried folders of contracts into legislative hearings, her voice sharp and steady as she laid bare the predatory clauses that had trapped performers into bleeding on cue, while Mendices stood behind her like a pillar, nodding with gravity as lawmakers shifted in their seats. And Carly Red's podcast broke records as each new guest peeled back another layer of manipulation, the editors confessing how they were ordered to stretch tears into arcs, security guards admitting they were told to wait before intervening, even makeup artists revealing how producers whispered instructions while touching up faces, all of it layering into a tapestry of complicity so staggering that fans who had once laughed at the chaos now shook their heads in grief, realizing they had been co-conspirators by watching. But that guilt transformed into energy as marches filled city streets, fans chanting not just for Rashida or Jasmine but for every unnamed cast member who had been chewed up and spat out. And as the noise grew louder, the network's legal fortress crumbled further. Leaked memos proving that executives not only knew about Contingency B but had approved it as a risk worth taking, language so cold it sent shivers down spines. And while the lawsuits mounted, the cast thrived in ways that stunned the industry. Rashida publishing a best-selling memoir titled More Than a Storyline, Jasmine landing the cover of a major magazine with the headline From Villain to Visionary, Yandy partnering with universities to teach media ethics, Carly receiving awards for her podcast, Scrappy headlining concerts where crowds screamed his anti-exploitation verses like anthems, and even Kirk re-emerging with a somber documentary that admitted his failures and begged men not to repeat his mistakes. A move that divided fans but proved that even he could not stay silent in the new age of truth. And so the legend grew, reaching beyond Atlanta into global consciousness. Foreign networks canceling copycat shows before they could spiral. International newspapers citing love and hip-hop as the cautionary tale of a generation. And fans across continents debating online with the same fervor once reserved for politics. Because this was not just gossip anymore. This was culture. This was survival. This was revolution. And in the end, the cancellation that was supposed to bury the franchise became the resurrection of its cast, who rose not as caricatures but as creators. Their lives no longer chopped into arcs, but flowing whole, messy, human, and unedited. A story still burning, still expanding, still echoing in every conversation where someone whispered that they had watched the night. The vault cracked and nothing was ever the same again. And even as the years pushed forward, the echoes refused to fade. Because the night love and hip-hop collapsed had carved itself so deep into the culture that every new scandal in entertainment was measured against it, every heated reunion, every reality TV feud compared back to the fight that ended the show, and the cast who had once been pawns became symbols of survival. Rashida, standing taller than ever as she opened community centers with doors painted gold to remind people that value was not defined by contracts. Jasmine, transforming her notoriety into influence that spilled into music, fashion, and activism, her smirk turned from a weapon into a shield. Yandy building an entire institution that trained young creators to own their voices and their footage. Mendices mentoring boys in neighborhoods that had once only seen him on television. Carly turning her tears into triumph as she toured globally with a live version of her podcast. Audiences laughing and crying with her as if she were family. Scrappy and Jock filling arenas where the beats shook the walls and the lyrics turned pain into poetry. Even Kirk, long disgraced, finding a sliver of redemption by funding programs that protected performers from exploitation. And as all of this bloomed, the vault itself became legend. Those beige hallways whispered about like folklore, students writing dissertations on the power of edited pain, journalists piecing together the breadcrumbs of memos and leaks, filmmakers crafting documentaries that screened in packed theaters where audiences gasped as though watching fiction. And through it all, the fans carried the flame. Their chants evolving into songs, their debates evolving into movements. Their loyalty binding them not to a show but to the people who had once been trapped inside it. And so the phrase love and hip-hop cancelled stopped meaning the end of a series and started meaning the beginning of a fight for truth. Whispered on stages, shouted at protests, painted on murals, printed on shirts, immortalized in hashtags that refused to die. And with every passing year the story grew heavier and brighter. Proof that even the most orchestrated chaos could not control what happened when the people inside the storm seized the narrative and claimed it as their own. And now, as you sit here watching this whirlwind of betrayal, survival, scandal, and truth unravel before your very eyes, you have to ask yourself what it all means. Not for the cast, not for the network, but for you, the fan, the witness, the one who has been here from the beginning, who watched the love stories crumble, who laughed at the chaos, who gasped at the fights, who tweeted every cliffhanger and posted every meme, because none of this would have mattered without you. The millions who turned the show into an empire. The millions who made every tear, every scream, every slam of a door echo louder than thunder. And now that empire has fallen, but the story is not over, because the truth belongs to the people who keep it alive. And that is you. So if you have felt the shock of Rashida's heartbreak, if you have carried the fury of Jasmine's accusations, if you have understood the fire in Yandi's defiance, if you have cried with Carly's tears, or nodded at Scrappy's verses, or even stared at Kirk's downfall with disbelief, then this is your moment to take the journey further. Your chance to stand with the voices who were once silenced. Your chance to prove that cancellation is not the end, it is the spark. And the only way that spark becomes a flame is if you feed it. So right now I am asking you, no, I am demanding you, to hit that like button until it glows like the stage lights that once burned down on the cast. Because every like is not just a click, it is a statement that you see them, that you hear them, that you refuse to let their pain be buried under corporate statements and broken contracts. And when you subscribe, you are not just subscribing to a channel, you are subscribing to a revolution. You are promising that you will be here for the next chapter, the next leak, the next confession, the next twist in a story that has outgrown television and spilled into real life. And when you comment, you are not just dropping words into a box. You are engraving your opinion into the record. You are joining the debate that has split families, divided cities, and taken over time. Because your voice is not background noise, your voice is part of this story. And the cast will see it, the world will see it, history itself will see it. So tell us where you stand. Are you Team Rashida, standing strong with the betrayed wife who turned her pain into purpose? Or are you Team Jasmine, rallying with the so-called villain who revealed herself as the whistleblower? Or are you Team Yandi, fighting for justice against manipulation? Or Team Carly, carrying every scar as a badge of survival? Or even Team Scrappy, turning chaos into art? Because no matter who you stand with, your choice fuels the fire. Your choice keeps the conversation alive. And let me remind you that silence helps no one. Silence is what allowed producers to script the pain in the first place, so break that silence. Shatter it into 1,000 pieces. Speak loud, type fast, claim your place in the culture. Because this is not just a recap, this is not just gossip, this is not just content. This is history in motion, and history demands participation. And if you think this story is done, then think again. Because there are still vault tapes we have not seen. There are still secrets that have not surfaced. There are still voices waiting to speak. And you do not want to miss the day when the next bombshell drops. The day the next piece of evidence cracks the internet in half. The day the next cast member steps forward with tears, with anger, with truth too heavy to edit. And if you are not subscribed, if you are not locked in with us, then you will miss it. You will be left behind while the world gasps in real time. And you will regret it. So do not wait. Do not hesitate. Do not scroll away thinking you will come back later, because later is too late. The story is unfolding now. The truth is spilling now. The movement is building now. And you need to be inside it, not outside. So hit subscribe. Join the family. Stand with the voices who fought to be free. And share this video with everyone you know. Share it with your friends who argued in the group chat. Share it with your auntie who used to watch every reunion. Share it with your cousin who still hums the theme song. Share it with anyone who has ever lived through drama that felt too wild to be real. Because when you share, you amplify. When you share, you become part of the army carrying this story forward. And if you ever doubted that your click mattered, look at the numbers. Look at the hashtags. Look at the way fans just like you turned a fight into a revolution. And know that your power is real, so use it, claim it, And let the world know that love and hip-hop may be cancelled, but the legacy is not. The story is not. The truth is not. Because the legacy lives in you. The story lives in you. The truth lives in you. And as long as you like, as long as you subscribe, as long as you comment, this flame will not die. It will rise. It will roar. It will burn brighter than any stage light, hotter than any feud, stronger than any contract. And that is why this moment is not the end. This moment is the beginning, and you are part of it. So, do not just watch, do not just listen, act, join, speak, fight, because the cast told their truth. And now, it is your turn to keep it alive. So like this video, subscribe right now, drop your comment below, and let us know whose side you are on. Because this is not just a video, this is a movement, and your voice is the fuel that keeps it alive.